Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatirons Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatironstuning.com and stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning. Now that the wheel is in place, all right, let's just dive into it here.
Yes, sir.
All right, so welcome back, everybody. This is episode number 70 of the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. So I'm here, we got Scotty in the shop, and we have a special guest with us. We have got Tanner Smith joining us today. And you might recognize him from his YouTube channel, Smeedia.
Yes, sir.
And Tanner, first and foremost, thanks very much for making the time to come on and chat with us and sit down.
Hey,
I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Excited to talk about everything that you've been doing, because you've been doing a lot of wild and crazy stuff. But before we dive into what you're doing now, I want to actually go back.
Okay.
So I actually went and watched your first couple of videos that you put up on your channel.
Oh, those are cringy.
Well, but here's the question I have for you is, let's say you bumped into somebody that's into cars and into motorsports but has not seen your channel. How would you describe your channel, or what kind of like what you do, or what your vision is for your channel?
I mean, it started out as me, because the whole reason I started making videos is I was frustrated because every time I go to install a part that I've never done before, because if you went way back to the beginning of the channel, when I first started, I didn't know how to install like injectors. I didn't know how to swap out. I didn't know how to build a motor or anything like that. So it started out with me just getting like frustrated. I was like, all right, how do I install these parts? And I'd go to a YouTube video to try to watch it, and I'd see some random dude talk about what he ate for breakfast for like 45 minutes before actually getting to the install. And then it would just be like, all right, we installed the part, it's on there. So I got frustrated. So I was like, all right, what if I make detailed install videos to help others kind of fill the gap of the struggles that I was running into? And then as that progressed, people were just starting to ask me more questions. I've been playing with Subarus for a long time, but I didn't really start getting into them until I like started making videos and whatnot. So as people were asking me more questions, I was like doing all this research, trying to learn. And then it kind of evolved into making like discussion and topic videos to try to answer some of those general questions, because a lot of the time people go on like Facebook, Naziok, or like I Want an STI, or some of these old forums that like half the posts have been deleted off of. There's missing images. So if they're trying to find references, it's very difficult for them to do so. So it kind of evolved from like doing like basic install videos of showing like step-by-step procedures of how to do things like from an intercooler install, spark plug changes, oil changes, diff services, things of that nature. And then just kind of evolved into like discussion topic videos. And now it's kind of to the point where we do, I don't want to say it's like vloggy style, because I don't really like doing vloggy videos, but it's like covering my builds, still doing the discussion videos, still doing topic videos. Whenever like there's an install that comes up, like I've done a lot of like how to install videos at this point. So it's not, there's not a lot out there that I'm like, well, I haven't done one on this, so make another video on the same thing that I've already made. So we've kind of gotten away from like the step-by-step how-tos, just because I've covered so many of them at this point. There's just not really a need to make those anymore unless like a new product comes out that people are interested in. So started out as me just trying to fill the gap of frustration where I was frustrated, trying to help other people, and then evolved into kind of what it is today.
Because you were trying to figure out, you were trying to learn how to do these things, how to install these parts. And so in the process of you figuring out, you basically documented that process and then put it out there to help other people.
Oh yeah.
Which is very cool.
There was your whole thing about like looking at the
did we lose
the photo bucket images that are just empty. It's just like, you got me?
You're breaking in and out.
What's crazy is he's literally like 30 feet back there, but he's not in some
for
remote
some
location.
reason the internet doesn't work very well back here. But yeah, so like the step-by-step videos, or the how-to on IWSTI or Naziok, an empty photo bucket pictures, and then the misinformation that is out there is just been insane. And it's been that way for a long time. You have like anybody would post up on those forums, this is how you do it, this is what you need. And a lot of times it just wasn't right. Like reading through all the bullshit to trying to find an actual answer was hard back in the day.
If you want to go way back,
I don't know everything out there. And if someone asks me something and I don't know it, I'll genuinely tell them I don't know, or I'll look into it and get back to them on that. Which I totally feel it on like the Naziok stuff with the misinformation, because I used to go on there. I was like, all right, so this is what I need to do. These are all the things that I need. And there's different methods of doing stuff out there, as everyone knows, but I feel it on that one.
Yeah. Well, and to go way back, PhotoBucket for a long time was just totally free. And that's why everybody used it to put pictures up on forums and everything like that. And then they changed to a point where you had to then pay to store pictures on PhotoBucket. And nobody wanted to do that. And that's when tons of all those pictures just disappeared. And all of a sudden, these really handy walkthroughs became a lot less handy overnight.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and now, I mean, that was a long time ago. That was over a decade ago. And so now like everything has kind of moved to video. And so like being able to watch a video and get the guidance of how to do stuff. I mean, that's just kind of what we've all kind of gravitated to, I think.
Yeah, and it's nice to have the visual aids when you're going through it, especially if you're someone who hasn't installed or doesn't work on cars a lot. Having that video walkthrough of like, all right, this is where this bolt is, this is where this line needs to go. Just having the actual like visual representation instead of just like a still image where you're like, all right, let me zoom in like 8 times on this photo to see where this bolt went or something along those lines.
Yeah. For sure. Well, and I want to touch on something else because I noticed this when in your video where you first got your 6-cylinder STI started, and you're talking about the process. You made this comment that when you started all of this, when you started the channel, I'm assuming that you, just like you said, you did not know that. You did not come from having this background, but like at this point, I mean, you've wired into standalone, you've done fabrication, you've done all sorts of crazy stuff at this point. And what I want to ask you about is for a lot of people with modern cars, because they're complicated. There's a lot of wiring involved. There's computers involved. There's like an array of sensors, and like it's intimidating to a lot of people. And I think that's one of the barriers from an enthusiast standpoint that prevents people from like kind of rolling up their sleeves and deciding, I'm going to dive into this. I'm going to take on the challenge of making this change or installing this part or whatever, because it's just there's a high level of intimidation.
Oh yeah.
And it sounds like you're able to just kind of get right through that. And so I'm wondering, like, how did you do that in the beginning, and how do you keep kind of working through all of those challenges?
The mindset that I typically work under is it's all mechanical. They all make replacement parts for all this stuff. So even if I mess up or I make a mistake or I damage something or I break something, I can buy a replacement for it and try again, or have somebody come help me do it again. So I've always worked under the mentality of, hey, if it breaks, I can get a replacement part. Or like the whole wiring harness situation with the car, the OEM harness. I made massive mistakes cutting that original OEM harness up the first time because I didn't know any better. I was going through trying to figure things out. And as I'm going through it, when I got to the point of starting to try to get the car to even power back on normally, that's when I realized I was like, all right, I've made a ton of mistakes here. I need to go back and try to figure out what I did wrong. And it was that whole concept of, hey, all right, I made a mistake. I cut up this entire harness. Granted, they're expensive if you buy them brand new. I'm cheap, and I don't like paying people to do things if I can figure it out, which is another factor that goes into why I will try to figure it out. A, I know how it's wired, or A, I know how it's built. B, it saves me money because I'm not paying somebody else to do it, because like the part cost is kind of negligible when it comes to building a car. It's the labor that you pay someone else starts to get insane. Like especially with motorsports wiring, that gets so expensive. So when I bought that harness, for example, the Haltech universal harness, I was like, all right, I've got this wiring diagram, and I knew nothing about wiring going into this thing. So I was like, all right, I have this wiring diagram here. I was like, all right, this wire tells me to go here, this one here. And then I'm back and forth on Haltech's website trying to figure out like forms. I'm like, all right, how do I route this kind of stuff? So I've always just worked under the mentality of like, if it breaks, so what? I can buy a replacement part to get it going again, or I can find another one. For the most part, I mean, with the EG that's in the car now, a lot of that stuff's discontinued. So some of the stuff I got to be a little bit careful with.
Sure.
But if it breaks, I mean, I can find a replacement part. I can try again. I'll learn from the mistake that I made and then just keep going along.
Man, that is what strikes me immediately with that is like, that is such a good mindset to have, because like if you're afraid of, if you come at the standpoint, come and work on your car with the standpoint of, I'm afraid of breaking anything, that can be paralyzing very quickly. So like to just have, I mean, it totally makes sense now how you're able to just keep working through all of these problems and find all these solutions to get to the point.
Yeah, and most of the OEM stuff, if I'm like cutting into it or hacking it up, if I have to buy a replacement or if I mess something up, I'll buy secondhand ones, like crashed cars online. They're parting them out all the time. The hard part is just finding like very specific parts that are very year specific. Like with mine, I ended up learning Subaru made changes to wiring harnesses in only 2017. So trying to find a very specific 2017 STI limited harness was a lot harder than I thought it would be. But I mean, even used ones, I got the entire inside of the cabin done for like $350 on eBay.
Wow. Well, and so kind of along those lines, so I mean, wiring is probably most of the DIYers out there. It's most of our least favorite thing to do.
Oh, I still hate it.
That's my least favorite thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Has wiring in everything that you've done, has wiring been the biggest challenge, or has there been something else that was an even bigger challenge than just figuring out wiring?
It was definitely the wiring for me, at least, just because I've never done it before. Going into this, you look at the Haltech universal harness, and it's this big bundle of wires.
Yeah.
You're like, I have no idea what half of these do or where they go. So I started out, I wire mapped out that engine bay probably 6 times before I committed to cutting any wires or splicing anything on or terminating anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
So the wiring, I'd say, was the biggest challenge, because I cut up the stock harness in the first place and made a whole bunch of problems that didn't have to be there, but it was a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it came to just wiring in the standalone, I mean, there's still a couple things here and there I'm struggling with. Like, I think the last wiring aspect that I have to figure out is just the fuel level sensor. Aside from that, everything else is solid. I mean, the one on the stock cluster still works, but I can't really see it half the time if I have the Haltech display up there.
Okay.
Now, so did you delete CAN bus?
No.
In that car?
So the car still has all OEM features that it came with. So it still has navigation, still has a perfect working radio. If I had heated seats, they would still work. The DC-CD still works. The SI drive doesn't work, but for the most part, all the OEM features still work.
Wow.
Yeah, CAN bus is one of those things where it brings a whole new level of complexity to get stuff to work like that.
Yeah,
And,
luckily the Elite 2500 I'm using ties into the stock CAN bus, and they actually have a CAN protocol built into the 2500 where I can use some of the features from the stock ECU to transfer over to the Haltech. Like, I'm using that for the speed sensors. There's a couple other small, like the brake boost or the brake sensor, things of that nature. There's a couple small sensors that I didn't just have to wire in. One of the problems I was running into with the standalone was AVI inputs. I just kept running out as I was going through things. So I was like, all right, what sensors do I absolutely need? Which ones do I just want that I don't need? So it's kind of finding the middle ground of how many inputs I could actually wire in.
Interesting. Yeah. So CAN bus, for people at home, if you're not sure, it basically is a network in the car. And it is truly a network where all these different functions are now talking to each other and monitoring each other. Like the easy ones in an STI is like the DC-CD, the SI drive, I think, is on it, the ABS, traction control,
system also, whole bunch of stuff.
They're all networked together. So if you make a change in one of these systems, the others know that, hey, there's an issue with this system over here. Hey, let's go into limp mode. Something's got to be wrong. Let's stop working.
Yeah, they freak out. I always thought of it as like the nervous system of the car. When you start pulling out CAN bus or you start cutting wires in CAN bus.
Yep. Where we still don't have a good solution for it is Scotty has an STI and it's everything works in it. Is in his race car, but he wants to get control over the DC-CD behavior. So we want to wire in a DC-CD controller, but we haven't found a good way to basically take control away from the CAN bus network so the DC-CD can do its own thing and not like lose all of the other functionality yet.
That sounds like a fun problem to try to fix.
Yeah, keeping the CAN bus happy.
I basically gave up on it. I decided that the factory DC-CD controller was good enough for now because I was sick of splicing CAN bus wires to make things work again. So
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
CAN bus wires are also tucked way up under the dash too, or in places that you just don't want to try to reach.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Man, wiring, there's no easy part of it.
No.
Yeah.
I still dread it to this day, even like small wiring. I just hate doing wiring, and it's so time consuming. I don't think a lot of people understand how time consuming wiring in a full harness actually is. But doing one connector properly, it eats so much time.
Yeah, and you have to take the time because even with a connector, if you get it wrong and it doesn't get a solid connection or a consistent connection, man, you could be having all sorts of weird problems and the troubleshooting that it could take to find your way back to that one connector to realize, I just had to, it wasn't seated properly.
For sure. I had a weird wiring issue last week when I was wiring in my fuel pressure sensor where the actual sensor was damaged, or it was a faulty sensor. So every time I'd plug in the fuel pressure sensor, it would pop the main fuse that controls the Haltech. And it like 2 days of trying to figure this out of why my main fuse was popping. I was like, I guess it's just a bad fuel pressure sensor. Swapped it out, plugged it back in, everything was solid again. Just
Man.
electricity and I don't get along very well.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm right there with
You have a lot of company in that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so Tanner, I just out of curiosity, before you started doing this, I mean, it seems like you're an enthusiast and you're doing things before you had your channel.
Mhm.
Did you have any kind of a mechanical background at all, or was this always something that was just kind of something you did for fun?
It was always a fun hobby. Like prior to doing this, I was when I got out of high school, when I was 18, I went into the Army for 4.5 years and I was a UAS operator. So I flew drones for 4.5 years. When I got out of the Army, I moved back from Louisiana back up here and I got into aerospace inspection for a couple of years. So I was doing quality assurance for Boeing, essentially. Got tired of that and then ended up somehow getting into product management for biochemical engineering at a company where we made cleaning products for gas stations using bioremediation and all this other weird chemical stuff. I absolutely hated sitting in the cubicle and doing the whole 9 to 5 thing. I just couldn't do it anymore. I was losing my mind, and I was making the videos at the time. And then we ended up just getting to a point where the videos would take over and become the full-time thing.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. That's awesome. I was looking, I think you're getting close to 700 videos now.
I think so, yeah.
Which is bananas, because you've been doing it for just over 2 years. Is that right? Or
About
close to 2 years?
About 2 years, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I try to do one upload every other day, whether
Okay.
it's a discussion, covering a topic, a how-to, or just covering one of the builds that I'm doing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's
a full-time job.
that is a full-time job. That's probably like 2 full-time jobs, honestly, because you also have to do the thing that you're making the content on, and you're making the content on the thing.
Yeah, it's like you have to think of video ideas. You have to script some of them out. You have to research some of them. You have to go shoot the video, edit the video, upload the video, do it like search engine stuff, thumbnail, hold it to comment responding. Because I still take the time to respond to all comments that people come through and put on, whether it's a video I uploaded 2 years ago or one that I uploaded 2 weeks ago. I'll still go back and spend probably 2 hours a day responding to comments.
Wow.
Yeah,
Which
good
is
for you.
But that's awesome.
A lot of people just fall off on that stuff. You know, the answer's there, but if they need clarification and no one wants to answer their question, the frustration's all of a sudden back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Back to square one.
Well, and so another thing that's interesting, how did you pick Subaru? Was it kind of by accident, or was it on purpose? And kind of related to that, did it have anything to do with the Subaru community that's out there?
Surprisingly, no. So I originally started out in Nissans. So I used to have a couple I had a 350Z. I imported a 1993 Skyline GTST. Had a 280Z that I was doing an RB25 swap in a couple of years ago. I've been playing with like FRSs and BRZs on the side. I had a whole bunch of STIs mixed in there as well. And then at the time of when I ended up starting the channel, I had recently sold my Skyline, bought my 17 STI. And then at the time I had a 13 FRS that I had just gotten rid of also. So my STI was my daily driver, my project car, my fun toy thing. So it ended up with me just coming back into Subarus prior. I think it was like 2012, I had like an 08 STI, which was my first like Subaru, because my first car was an 88 XT coupe. Which that thing was a pile, but it was so much fun. The thing kept going.
This is a Subaru XT.
Yeah, the one with the pop-up headlights, the spaceship looking steering wheel,
the wedge.
Mm-hmm. The wedge.
Yeah,
I have a soft spot for that car. It is weird and it's crazy, but like,
I love them. I want to get another one day, but they're getting hard to find.
They're super hard to find. Yes.
Yeah. So at the time, it was me. I left Nissan, came back into Subaru, and just started making the videos again, or started making the videos just to start with, and then it just kind of kept going from there.
Well, what's really interesting is like you have a ton of community support behind you in everything that you do, and I think that certainly in part, like you're very good at being in contact with everybody. So I mean, I think that's where a lot of people get excited about what you're doing and support you in what you're doing, which is very cool. But like just the fact that the Subaru community out there is so supportive, I think is one of the things that makes Subaru unique.
Yeah, that is one thing that I've noticed being in multiple different like niche car communities over the years. Subaru has been one that's always been a little bit more connected than some of the other ones out there. Like the Nissan community, when I was in there, it's hit or miss depending on who you're talking to or the groups that you're in. Subaru communities can be a little hit or miss sometimes, but for the most part, everyone's pretty interconnected and pretty close for the most part.
Yeah,
and willing to help
talk.
out.
Yeah, willing to talk, willing to help. What one of the first communications you and I had was you were having an issue with an oil pump made by
Yes.
Roger Clark. And so I was aware of it. And so I reached out to them to like, hey, like, I'm not sure if you're aware of what's going on, but you might want to reach out to Tanner and see what's going on. And they're like, oh yeah, we know. We've had like 6 people tell us that he's having an issue. And so we're trying to get a hold of him. And but it was just because of that community out there that like they were really excited and interested in what you're doing. And they're like, trying to help any which way you can, even if it's trying to like get the Roger Clark guys to like give you some pointers. And fortunately, in that case, it ended up being a simple solution. But it's just like that was to me was an example of just like how like present and active the Subaru community is, and it was just a cool thing.
It's insane, and I appreciate the support from everyone that's been on the channel and helping out where they can. Like I've had people across the globe, like with the EG, help me with the weirdest of things at times. I remember when I was trying to sort the wiring harnesses issues and trying to get the ECM and the BIU and everything to recommunicate. I had a ton of people reaching out to Subaru of America to the point where I had people at Subaru of America emailing me, trying to see what they could do to an extent, because at one point we came down to the fact, because we were trying to get our hands on an SSM4 laptop and software to be able to try to do all of the reset procedures ourselves. And we obviously couldn't get our hands on one. We could pirate some SSM3 software that wouldn't work if we even tried to do it. But I was having people from Subaru America trying to reach out and see what they could do as well. Like people who worked in specific districts, people who worked at like their headquarters. It's insane. And not everyone at Subaru America is like a car person or generally even likes cars. But for those that were there, it was really cool to like see the community be able to like reach out that far.
Yeah. Yeah, the arms of the Subaru community do have a wide reach, and it's global. It's not just here in the US. It's crazy, like in Australia and over in Europe, just how big the Subaru communities are, and there is a decent amount of communication back and forth. It seems like
it's crazy. It's cool though. It's really cool to see.
Yeah. All right. Well, so let's stop kind of like talking on the sides. Let's talk about this crazy project that you have, just in case anybody out there is not aware of, like you've done a lot of other things. You have a BRZ, you have the Evo project that you're working on, probably a bunch of other little small things, but the big one is you're putting an EG33, a 6-cylinder engine in your STI.
Yes, sir.
Turbocharged, and you're like, gosh, 95% of the way there. Like
I'd say it should be going to the dyno next week for the break-in tune. So right now the car starts and it kind of drives. There's just a couple small fabrication things that I'm waiting to come back on, a couple parts that are out for delivery today here, and they're just waiting on shipping times at the mercy of FedEx and UPS.
There's a lot of that going around.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, and so how did you make that decision? Like you had played around with your car, with the STI with the 4-cylinder engine and done a bunch of stuff to it. How did you decide, like, I want to add 2 extra cylinders?
So why did you decide to do this to yourself?
At the time when I decided to do this, obviously I do YouTube full time. So it's like, all right, there's a lot of people out there that do STIs and EJ videos. I was like, how do I mix things up and do something different? So me and my roommate were going back and forth and we landed on 6-cylinder. And then it came down to, all right, what 6-cylinder should we do? There's EZ30s, EG33s, and EZ36s. So then I came across Subi Performance and I started watching a lot of their videos, and they had a really good breakdown of like the EZ versus the EG. And that's what led me to go with the EG over the EZs. Like at the time, I had no extent of going as far as I did with this EG, because I was like, all right, it's got thicker cylinder walls, resembles an EJ a little bit more. Yeah, it's a little bit longer, because at the time we didn't have an engine at the time. So we're like, oh, we'll go with the EG. It looks a little bit longer, but we could still probably fit things in there. That would way off on that, first of all. So at the time, I was trying to do something a little bit different to stand out more, especially being on like YouTube's so competitive, especially with with how many videos get uploaded a day and trying to stand out a little bit more. So I was like, I want to do something a little bit different. So we decided to embark on the 6-cylinder idea, which at the time when I started this, I had absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into.
Okay. And now that you've almost gone all the way through this process, like are you excited, or are you just like so hoping that it like you can close the book on this one and like move on to something else? Or
I
what do
mean,
you
that
think?
car will never be done, so I don't think a book will ever be closed on it.
Okay.
There's going to
Okay.
be so many changes and revisions because like when I was working with Outfront when we were building the motor, there was so many unknowns when we were going into it. Like I remember when I got the short block back and I had the heads and we were building the long block, in Outfront's instructions, I had the 1/2-inch head studs and then I had a bag of ball bearings. And I was like, why do I have ball bearings with my head studs? And in the description of how to install these head studs, it was like, if the head stud's too low, put one of these ball bearings down in there, then put the head stud in there. We're like, all right, but we may need to clearance the head studs to clear the internal cams, just because like there's only one cam on the outside of the engine. There's 2 internal cam gears in each head, so we had to make sure that the cam gears cleared the head studs. So we had to grind some head studs. There's just so many unknowns. So even after the car's tuned and running, I guarantee there's going to be more revisions and more changes that we make to it. It's still on a stock 6-speed, which I don't think that'll last too long. So at some point that 6-speed will get, I don't know if I'm going to do like a PPG gear set or a dog box in it or something. I've been looking into rear diffs recently, looking into R200s from a 350Z.
Yep.
Trying
to
to
like
figure
a
out
rear-wheel
how to
drive.
fit all that stuff up. So I don't think it'll ever actually be done. It'll just continue to grow.
Sure. Well, and it's, I mean, you're by the time you're done, or by the time this chapter is done, I mean, you've kind of rebuilt the whole car.
Oh yeah.
And so like if you're going to have to re-engineer another system like the transmission or brakes, I guess it just kind of it kind of fits with the extent that you've reworked the car at this point.
Yeah, I mean, what was it? What month is it? It's April. Like 4 months ago, that car was completely stripped. Nothing on the interior, no wiring harnesses, nothing. Is just I've torn that car apart and put it back together so many times at this point.
That's crazy. But it's so cool that it is like right there to finally get it on the dyno and see what it's going to do.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any guesses or aspirations for kind of how much power it'll make?
So the setup that's on there now, we'll probably cap the turbo at 1,000 wheel horsepower. And then my goal with the car is 1,200 in the end, which I won't ever run the car at 1,200 for the most part. I just want to dyno queen for that number.
Sure.
Realistically, I'll probably keep the car around 800-900 for most driving aspects. But it'll probably cap at 1,000 with this setup. It's got a precision 6870. It's twin scroll, dual ball bearing. Single turbo, yeah. Because I played with the twin turbo idea after looking at ASF machines when they did theirs, but I was like, yeah, that's a lot. That seems like a lot more expensive. Takes up a lot more room. So we ended up deciding on the 6870. Got that in there. It's just mounted up behind the passenger headlight. So I've got 2 sets of headlights right now that I'm swapping back and forth between, one with a massive cutout in the headlight for the turbo and the other one just like normal street headlights if I wanted to drive it on the street. Technically speaking, the car's still 100% street legal for Washington, so that's kind of cool.
Nice.
Absolutely.
That's a nice aspect of it.
Ensure that you'll actually be able to enjoy the car for a bit.
Yeah. So after we get it on a break-in tune, because right now I built out the map with the help of this gentleman named Kevin down in Australia. He has another EG33 that's built relatively a little bit more than mine in an 05 STI. And then between him and Josh Bader and me, we're able to kind of build a base map to get it started and kind of driving. It doesn't drive very well right now, but it at least idles solid, which is really all I needed to be able to burp the cooling system and be able to pull it up onto a trailer. So
nice.
At least it starts.
Well, and there's so much involved with getting that car tuned because of all the changes. Like I'm sure that I would guess it's probably going to take a day or two on the dyno to get it dialed in. But then at that point, I mean, I cannot wait to see what it's like to drive. That's going to be crazy.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to drive it. I haven't driven that car in about 2 years now since I pulled the EJ out. And I prematurely pulled that EJ out because I remember the clutch was slipping in it. So I was like, well, I might as well just pull the motor. I'm not going to buy another clutch for it if I'm engine swapping it. So pulled the EJ, sold all the stuff off the EJ to fund the EG. And then it just kind of sat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is a big process. So it's going to take time, but it's just so cool that it's like, you're almost there.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
The sound of it got me so excited when I first heard it turn on too. It's with the full catback on there. It sounds like a weird Porsche V8 love child type of car. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned because you've done a couple videos on that. You said that it's just incredibly loud.
It needs mufflers.
Okay. So it doesn't have any mufflers at the point? Okay.
No, right now it doesn't have any mufflers. So I need to find because it's a full 4-inch turbo back.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to find some relatively large mufflers so that way we're not stepping down from 4-inch down to like 3.5 or 3 inches, something along those lines. I found a couple on Vibrant that I'll probably order after the break-in tune, just to get things back up there. Because that's another thing. When it came to building this car, is everything was out of pocket for the most part. Like I had some companies step in and help out. Like ACT sent me their mod twin, so like huge shout out to ACT.
Mm-hmm.
Fluid Damper sent over like a EJ crank pulley. iWire sent some stuff over. All fantastic companies to work with, but for the most part, like 95% of that was all out of pocket. So I don't think people realize when they're like, "Why isn't it done yet?" I'm like, this stuff gets expensive quick.
It's super expensive. Yeah.
Super expensive. Yeah,
and it's not even the big things. It's the small nickel and diming.
Yes.
Every little thing. It's just like, okay, I got this put together. Okay, now I need this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now where do I find this? Now I have to order this from Australia or
it's never ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, well, what a crazy process. I mean, once the car's running and driving, like, are you thinking you're just gonna drive it, or is there anything like kind of on your horizon that you want to do with the car? Like anything you're dreaming of doing with it?
There's a local track out here called the Ridge Motorsports Park. The car's going to be going out there so I can play with it and learn how to do time attack with that car. I'm going to take it out to the drag strip just for fun because no one will probably expect that car to do what it does. And then aside from that, it'll just be like a street car that I drive around. So between those three things, it's whatever I want to set it up for.
Okay. Well, and so you also have a BRZ. You got a new BRZ.
Yes.
Is that, and I think if I am reading between the lines, that's kind of what you're using as a daily driver right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my 2022 BRZ is my daily, which I always tell people I'm not going to go over the top of my cars, but I always end up doing so. So once ECU Tech starts releasing tuning software for the car, I'll probably start looking into forced induction a little bit more for it.
Okay.
And it'll just be a fun, either supercharged or turbocharged little daily driver BRZ.
Okay. So you're still thinking daily driver, not maybe turning it into a track car?
No, the BRZ will be that one will stay my daily for a little while.
Okay.
The Evo, I plan on turning into a track car. So between the Evo and the STI, those two will be like the toys, and then the BRZ I'm trying to keep somewhat tamed.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of the challenges is it becomes really hard if you've got too many projects.
Yeah.
Because then, like, if you have 2 projects, and especially if you have 3 projects, they're all going to be in some state of not working or not done, and it just makes it harder to get any one of them.
Yeah, that's another problem that I have is I like to tear down my daily drivers and do fun things to them, and then sometimes it takes way longer than I expected. Like my old 05 STI, I bought that car as a daily driver, and that ended up being a 630 horsepower rotated STI in the end.
Wow.
That was a fun car though. I kind of missed that car.
600 horsepower in an STI, I'd say that's fun.
Yeah,
sure.
I quickly learned with that one that type of power for a daily is completely unneeded and totally unusable. So
right.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things with Subarus, because they only have 4 cylinders, you get to that power level, and it's just they become a lot more demanding. And if you're going to drive it every day,
that car would throw fits all the time.
Yeah, the reliability just becomes a lot more challenging. It's something like, you almost have to run in and get to that point before you realize, just, man, is it really fun enough to justify all these extra little issues and juggling that you have to do to keep the car going versus turning
that car was the first car that I built my own motor for, because I had a spare set of case tabs that I sent down to out front. We did V3 closed decking, 1/2-inch head studs, CP pistons, I want to say they were. I don't remember right now. Manley H Tough Plus rods. And that was the first one I ever put together to myself. I was like, I don't know what problems this thing's going to have, but it could have problems after we get it going. And for the most part, it's still going today. The new owner of the car, I sold it back in October. It's still going strong, kicking strong. It's an 05 STI. It's still going to have small issues here and there just from age and time. But for the most part, awesome. glad to hear that one's still kicking. But building the motor in your daily driver and then trying to send it that one's always a fun time.
That is another trick. Yeah. Yeah, because it's
learning where to draw that line is always tough.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, yeah. How's my new daily? It's my new race car. Now I need a new daily, and then
It's a never-ending cycle.
Yeah.
and the next thing you know, you don't have a daily because everything's broke.
Yep.
Or torn apart. Or
and then you need a tow rig, and then you need a trailer.
Yeah,
And you
I
have to have a place.
still need those.
Yeah. Well, and so Tanner, you mentioned the time attack and stuff, like, because that's where I was kind of trying to go with that is, do you have other aspirations other than just building the cars? Like, do you want to like get out there and drive? Do you want to compete in cars? Is that kind of another goal?
100%. One day I'd like to compete. Back in 2013 to 2015, I used to do autocross every weekend. I don't know if you guys know of this. Do you guys ever remember a company called HPT Motorsports? They were up in Connecticut.
I do remember that. Yeah.
I used to be sponsored by HPT Motorsports for autocross driving. So they were an awesome company to work with when they were still in business. Unfortunately, they went out of business a couple of years ago. They were awesome. I used to do autocross every weekend. And then when I got out of the Army and I moved back up here, I tried to get into more track events again, but it's insanely expensive up here compared to what it was down there for track days. Registration fills up so fast that it's so hard to get on these registration lists up here. There's not a whole lot of motorsports parks. Like we have Pacific Raceways where they do some autocross stuff, but they do autocross and like drifting every now and then. Okay. But like the Ridge out here, it's just it fills up so fast. B, it's expensive for someone who's like paying out of pocket for everything. $500 for one day at the track. That's hard to justify.
Oh wow, yeah,
that's a lot.
That's hard to justify for a track like that. Like it's a fantastic track. It's just that's a lot of money to be thrown out because like you're paying for the track day ticket, you're paying for fuel to get out there. Yeah. If it's a car that you don't really trust to drive out there and back, then you need a truck and a trailer. Probably gonna need to like obviously bring food, water, snacks, and whatnot. It's just it's hard to justify nowadays to spend upwards of $600, $700 to go out there for a day. Normally, whenever I want to go out and do like spirited fun driving, I'll go up like deep into the mountains where there's no one and just have a little bit of fun away from like all of civilization. Just because at that point you're just paying for fuel and a little bit of time.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a $600-$700 track day, and then if something breaks, can easily turn into a way more expensive track day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a crazy price for just a track day out there. I mean, that's the price. That's more than the cost of like a whole NASA weekend.
Yeah, I think on the low side for a full day out there, I've seen at the lowest about $350 just to be able to get out on the track. But even so, $350 is a lot.
Yeah, because that's just the entry fee. You got, like I said, tires, brakes, consumables, fuel, like anything that you need to get to and from. Yeah, it adds up quickly.
It just gets so expensive. Like a couple of my buddies drift. They're big drift dudes, and there's a drift track about like 2 hours away from us. It's extremely reasonable price. $80 for the day. You park, you have like your own little spa, you can pop up your tents and you go out on the track. It's open drift all day for them for $80, and then you just bring your own tires. Like that's reasonable. That's justifiable. Yeah. But like I get it. It's like a professional full course track, but like 350, that's hard.
Yeah. Well, I'd hope that at some point there's another track that is in your range that is maybe a little bit more affordable, so you can get out there and track more.
Yeah, I mean, as things grow, I'd like to be able to get out there more. I know this year I'm driving the STI down from Seattle area down to Subi Fest in California. So I know there's some tracks out there that I want to try to, if the opportunity comes up, get the car out there, which that'll be a very trusting experience to try to drive that car.
So you're going to drive it all the way down. Okay.
That's the goal, is to drive it, because I built the car so that way I could daily it if I wanted to. It has everything. It doesn't have AC anymore just because there's no room in the engine bay for AC, but for the most part it's also built so that way I can drive it as I please to wherever I want. It's just learning to, like with any new or fresh build that you do, especially with an engine swap of this caliber, it's learning to trust the car again. Yeah. And figure out the weak points and the faults that it's going to have, then start mitigating around those. Yeah.
But I mean, you can, get it up and running, start doing short trips to longer trips, and just build up that confidence. And like, honestly, in some ways, just getting on the highway at a reasonably decent speed at a good clip and a lot of airflow, there should be good cooling. Hopefully minimal surprises.
Hopefully no surprises come up. Yeah. I try to avoid the bad ones where possible.
Exactly. Exactly. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, so one of the other things that I wanted to just ask you about, because this is the other thing that I think it sets you apart in a lot of ways, but that I appreciate the most from your channel, which is like you've said, I've seen you say a few times that you're a very transparent person.
Mhm.
And one of the cool things that about all the videos that you make is you show everything. Like
Yeah, I
it's
show my
like,
mistakes, the whole process of doing that. I won't hide anything. Like I tell
yeah,
people, I am just a dude in the garage, like everybody else is trying to learn how to do this stuff. I make mistakes all the time, and I own up to them. I'm not gonna edit out or hide my mistakes from people. Like if my mistakes help somebody else avoid the mistake, that's a win.
and
Absolutely.
it does. And that's what like how did you come to the decision that that was the approach you were going to take? That you were just going to be completely transparent, and if something works, great, here this thing is working. If it doesn't work, hey, here's where this didn't work and why. Like how did you decide that that's the approach you were going to take?
I mean, I've always just been that way. I've never been someone to like try to hide things or be like, well, or make myself out to seem perfect or anything of that nature. So I've always been one to be like, all right, well, even if my mistakes help X, Y, or Z avoid the mistake that I just made, then it's still helping people out. Like I've
Mhm.
uploaded videos that have been the entire video has been nothing but me making mistakes.
Hmm.
And even the people that watch those videos, they're like, all right, now I know what not to do. Which I mean, in my opinion, is still a win.
In some and probably I wonder if you'd agree with this as far as you've gone like with your STI with six-cylinder swap. If you would know like all of the things that don't work, that's almost more valuable than knowing all the things that do work or will be easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
And
then you know what to avoid as you're doing it.
yep, yeah. And so like seeing that you've taken that approach, that's one of the things I just appreciate the most about everything you're doing because it's just it being able to show people and like here's what didn't work and why. I mean that there's so much to learn from that, and
Yeah,
I
and
think that's
I
just
think
so helpful to the community.
that's also just with being on YouTube in general. I think that's one of the big problems with YouTube is a lot of people out there will hide or cover up or not upload the mistakes they make
Yep.
along the journey
Mhm.
of doing whatever they're doing. So it you get a disconnect with the audience because you're like, well, I'm doing everything right. I'm doing everything right the first time. And it's just
Right.
I'm like I tell everyone, I'm just a normal dude like everyone else out
Yeah.
working in a garage. I don't have a big like I have a small shop that I keep the Evo in with it, which is pretty much just a storage unit. And
Mhm.
the car's on jack stands. I don't use fancy tools or anything like that. Everything I get is at like Home Depot, Harbor Freight, or like some weird specialty tools that I may order online every now and then. But it's all common hand tools that anybody can go get.
Yeah.
Like the whole majority of the STI build I did in the garage with common tools.
Yeah. Which again makes it's just you're basically putting yourself in the environment that 95% of the rest of us are in
Yeah.
and figuring it out and showing how you can make it work.
Yeah, because don't get me wrong, it's cool to see people do wild and crazy builds on like a full-on, full-staffed shop with all of these like fancy, like they got 3D scanners, 3D printers, a whole fabrication team and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's cool, but it's like I can't relate to that.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and it's something where it's like, oh look, hey, we're building this carbon fiber panel for this, that, or the other. It's like that it's super cool and we like to follow it, but it's something that is not something that most people will probably take on
Yeah.
themselves. Yeah. Well, and so just kind of looking to the horizon, is there any other like in terms of like crazy builds or anything like that? Is there anything that you kind of are setting your sights on, or like is it maybe shifting your focus to the BRZ like you mentioned, or is there
Uh,
what are you kind of dreaming about these days?
Speaking of crazy things with the BRZ, or speaking of the BRZ and crazy things, I've been tossing around the idea of EJ swapping the BRZ and making it all-wheel drive. That's been
Ooh,
an idea that I've been playing
Cool.
with, just because I think making an actual like Subaru just throws the STI badge on pretty much anything nowadays.
mhm.
So making an actual STI BRZ with an EJ and trying to fit up a 6-speed is an idea I've been playing with. Probably
Okay.
wouldn't happen for like a year
Yeah,
or so until I've at least gotten the Evo and the STI running, so that way I still have
Right.
cars to drive.
Good.
But
Good.
we've been playing with the idea of trying to do something like that in the near future.
Interesting.
I'm totally down with this idea.
It's
Yep.
it's what's interesting. There was a guy. So there was a guy at Pikes Peak that had put an EJ engine in this BRZ, and
Oh,
so it did fit, but it was with the BRZ transmission. Yeah, it's still rear wheel drive. Last name was Yoshioki, I want to say this was like 15 or 16, something like that. It's been a while back, but and that was really interesting. And at the time, he actually had a 2.6 liter stroker engine in the BRZ.
Ooh.
And I think that was the year that was it Ken Gucci was driving the BRZ. I don't know if you remember, Scotty, that was supercharged. And Gucci took first and Yoshioki took second. But it was like really close between those two cars. So that part could be done. The drivetrain would be tricky. I would like to see what you would come up with that, but
I mean, we could figure it out one way or another. I mean, that's another thing too, is like a lot of people like throw these ideas out there. They're like, all right, I want to do this to my car. I'm like, I guarantee you, if you work at it enough, you'll figure out a way. It may not always be the cheapest, and it may take a little bit longer because it might be a little bit more expensive, but there's always a way to do something.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of makes me think of this.
So,
go ahead, Scotty.
I was just going to say, lots of head scratching, but I mean, sitting around drinking beer, head scratching, you're going to figure it out eventually. You just got to jump in there and get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tanner, how do you approach fabrication? Or like, did you learn to weld in the process of doing all this? Did you teach yourself? Did you have some guidance?
So on the fabrication side of things, a buddy of ours did all the fabrication on the car. I'm learning to weld now. About a month and a half ago, I went out, I bought like Harbor Freight's top tier welder to be able to learn to weld on. So I've been learning to weld so that way I can start doing all of my own fabrication things. Because one thing that's always bothered me with building cars is relying on other people if I don't have to. It takes longer. B, like I said earlier, it's more money. I'd rather spend the money on tools and then practice doing it. Even if my welds look like booger welds, as long as they hold pressure or they stick metal together and they work for whatever I'm trying to do, I can grind down my welds to make them look pretty if I really want to. But it's just going out, like I try to do everything in-house as much as I can, just so that way I can have full control over it. Like I have minimal knowledge of welding right now. So I'm going through the entire process of learning to weld still. And it's just getting hands-on with the tools to be able to learn how to do it. But on the fabrication side of things, we had a buddy of ours who owns a local fab shop do all the fabrication on the STI.
Okay.
There's no way I would have been able to do all that. Okay. Not yet, at least.
So but it's sometimes knowing your limitations is very valuable. And so calling in the experts is very valuable. But like fabrication is one of those things, like that's one of those last pieces of the puzzle. If you're going to really like take on like kind of a carte blanche project, is to be able to know and figure out like, okay, like I'm going to take a BRZ that doesn't have a front axle. How can I take out the structure that's there and replace it with a structure that would then support that, and that's something that like I would love to know how to do it, but that is not my skill.
For things like, I mean, we've done minor things like that. We're doing a couple other things with a couple other projects that I can't talk about yet, just because it's my roommate stuff that we're doing with his. But for some of that stuff, like we're doing some drivetrain things to his car, and we need to do kind of that. And what we just we jack the car up and we just sit there and look at it for a while until we can figure something out, and then we'll test something. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, we'll stare at it some long, like another 25-30 minutes till we get another idea. I mean, that's how we do it, at least. We just kind of go back and forth with each other until we figure out something that works for what we're doing. And if we find something that does work and then it fails, we go back and try to do it again.
Yeah. But it's like learning that process of how to be able to like make that level of a change to a car or a chassis that you have. Like all of a sudden then all sorts of possibilities start to open up then.
Oh yeah. And then like changing one thing could change 8 other things. And you're like, all right, well, we just did this. Now we got to figure out these other 8 things that we just altered.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Well, as we're getting closer now here, I don't want to keep you too long because I'm sure you got plenty of stuff to do. But I wanted to ask you, because you put together a video on it. Because you've had multiple STIs and obviously you're very attached to the STI, maybe what do you think of the fact that now the STI has been discontinued? Is that where do you stand with that, and what do you think that means for the future with Subaru?
I think Subaru has gotten extremely. All right, first of all, let me say I love Subaru. I've had at this point probably 14 STIs, 7 WRXs, BRZs, Foresters, Imprezas. I love Subarus, don't get me wrong. But the direction that Subaru is going, I think, is very lazy of them. I don't think, and I've made a video on this, I don't see an EV STI working well for Subaru if they do decide to push EV in 2030 or whatever. They have so much competition with electric vehicles of people that have been doing it a lot longer than them that I don't see it succeeding very well for them. And even if they do decide to push it, I think pushing that MSRP up of just a full EV STI is going to completely just alienate their demographic of people to buy the car. I mean, you're already looking at like $45,000 for a 2021 STI brand new. I want to say for a limited model, you add EV on top of that, you're looking at $65,000 for one of these cars. I just don't see it happening. But I mean, even with the new WRX, it's a little bit disappointing to see what they did with that car. I understand some of the aspects of why they did what they did, but it's just they've gotten the interior of the car just looks like it's been thrown together from a base Impreza and a Outback combined. It's very rental car feeling, in my opinion. The fact that they killed off SPT to call their CVTs Subaru Performance Transmissions, like, come on, we don't want CVTs. No one's buying the WRX for a CVT transmission.
Yes, but not the enthusiast base.
But that's true. That's true. The enthusiasts who actually go out, modify, and drive the cars aren't buying them for CVTs, I should say. Yeah. Well, some of them are, but there's nothing wrong with it if they do want to get a CVT. I just think Subaru's getting lazy with what they're doing. Like, I miss the older days of Subaru when they're doing like the GDs, GRs, where everything was Legos. You could interchange things easily. They put a turbo 2.5 in there. And I understand that they're trying to comply with emission standards at this point and meet regulations that they're being constrained on a little bit more. But this is disappointing to see. I think with Toyota coming out that GR Corolla, it's going to take over a lot of the market where the STI kind of left.
Yep.
Do you think so?
I do think so. I want a GR Corolla. I think they're fun looking little cars that have a decent amount of power, like a 3-cylinder that makes 300 crank.
I think
that thing would be fun.
I think most of us want this GR Corolla. I think damn near every single person I've talked to is like ready to convert. You know, like, well, if Subaru is going to drop the ball, then this is what's available, and it's amazing. I mean,
and I kind of think
Toyota
that
knocked it out of the ballpark.
I kind of think that Toyota has a sneaky hand in Subaru right now, where they're kind of puppeteering things. Could just be an idea, because I know Toyota owns a decent amount of Subaru.
I think it's 20%.
Yeah, and with Subaru being like, all right, we're not going to do the STI in the United States, and then Toyota coming out with the GR Corolla that's kind of similar in specs, but a little bit better. It's kind of seems a little fishy.
I would not be surprised if at some point, maybe in 2023, when the circuit edition of the GR Corolla is available, that maybe there's a Subaru that happens to have a 3-cylinder turbo engine in it. I really wonder if, like with the BRZ being co-developed between both of those and both of them having their own version, I really wonder, especially with Subaru saying we're not going to continue on with the STI, does that mean, is there a possibility that we're going to see a Subaru badged Corolla?
I don't know. Don't think, if they do decide to do it, I don't think that it should be STI branded at all. I think that Subaru is kind of killing the STI name by like they made a Solterra STI. Like, they're throwing the badge and all these parts on all these cars now, and it just feels like they're killing the heritage of the STI as a car. I think if they want to bring back another car that's not similar to the STI and they want to make another sports car, call it something else.
Do you think? Well, one of the questions I want to ask is, what if Subaru put that STI moniker on a BRZ STI, but they finally took the BRZ to another level than what it just is? Do you think that the BRZ could carry on that STI mantle while they're doing whatever they do in the background with the all-wheel drive electric thing?
I think if they brought the BRZ is a fantastic handling car out of the box. I absolutely love mine, but I think if they wanted to put an STI badge on it, they need to actually up the performance of the car and not just put on all those little aero bits that they have on them and all these stickers that say STI everywhere. I think it could do exceptionally well, but I don't think that Toyota would let them deviate away from the GR86 that much to the point where they could make an actual STI model of the BRZ. I think Toyota would step in and be like, no, you can't do that. You're going to start competing with the Supra. You're going to start competing with all of our other cars.
I think that they should bring us in to negotiate between the two companies.
I'm about it.
Because to me, like, okay, well, hey, we're gonna discontinue the STI. Well, and Toyota says, well, all right, we're gonna bring out the GR Corolla. That's kind of like picking up on the coattails of what the STI established. And, all right, well, that's fine. How about you finally let us make a BRZ that's maybe the BRZ can compete with your entry-level Supra, but we have our BRZ, you have your Supra. I think there's enough room out there for everybody. I don't
I
think that's
totally
going to be
agree.
stepping on anybody's toes.
I totally agree. I just think it's Toyota being a little bit greedy with sales.
Could be,
Mhm.
could be. But I
But
think we just
from
sorted
the
it out.
enthusiast standpoint, it would be fantastic to see. I'd buy one.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. And to actually
Yeah, absolutely.
like to have those options. I mean, if you had like a turbocharged BRZ and you're looking at a 4-cylinder Supra and like there's a real decision to be made there.
Oh yeah.
I think the enthusiasts win.
Oh yeah. I mean, even when I had a 13 BRZ that I turbocharged like a year ago. Fun little car with a turbocharger on it. Completely
Yeah.
changes the driving characteristics. A lot of
Yeah.
people say forced induction ruins a BRZ. Disagree. 100%. Made the car way
Yeah.
more fun.
Yeah. So I think we've just solved it for them. So for all the people from Toyota and Subaru that are listening, just bring us in, just bring us into the boardroom. We'll help you sign all the papers. We'll just make it all happen.
We can make this happen. We
Yeah.
can also help
Yeah,
fix a little bit of their styling changes too.
Free consulting us.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Just build the cars so we can get them. That's all that we're going to charge.
Yeah, that's all we need.
Yeah. Well, now and like at the tail end of that, the one other question that has really been bounced around my mind is, what if the GR Corolla vastly outsells the STI? Because there's some key differences. It is all new. It is, like the fact with the GR Corolla, the biggest thing in that package is that everything is new. It's a new drivetrain, new engine, it's a new platform, compared to like the STI, which was very similar from 2004 to 2021. Like there was some appearance changes, some functionality changes, but really, like at the core, there's not a
Not
huge
too much
difference.
different.
So is it the newness of the GR Corolla, or is it the fact that like just the way that it's been handled, the potential that's there? What is it about that car? And if it, like, say it sells 2 to 3 times what the STI was selling, what does that mean?
That is a good point. We haven't thought about that yet or even tossed that idea around. I know the GR Yaris has been out for a year or two now at this point.
Yeah.
Over
And very limited production.
Yeah, people have been playing with those a little bit. And I'm pretty sure it's the same power plant and drivetrain as what's in the Corolla. So we've seen some R&D with them already. If it vastly outsells STI numbers, I mean, that could potentially just kill off another US market STI at that point.
Well,
Right.
I would look at it from a positive standpoint. I would say that what that might be an indicator of is that this is the motivation for Subaru to spend the money on developing new technology, bring something fresh to a platform.
Actually bring competition back to them.
Well, and I mean, not even competition, but just like there's, like if you build it, we will buy it.
Yeah.
Like you're sticking with the STI. They stuck for so long with the tried, tested, and proven platform. And like around the shop, our guess was the reason that they never got a direct injected engine in the STI was because everything in the STI was a known quantity. Like if you want to modify an EJ engine, everything is tested and proven. You want to make 500 to 1,000 horsepower. There's 3 paths or more that are tested and proven. You know which way you want to go with it. Like with the new WRX, it's direct injection. Everything is different, and maybe they were afraid that like the potential wouldn't be there in the same way for the enthusiast base. But it's like, but if you give us a good platform, like the aftermarket will,
we will build it.
Build parts to your door and get excited about it. So I think
if Subaru really wanted to take their FA series engines to the next level, just put Toyota's D4S system on all of them. Having the ability to have port and direct injection and not having to add a full intake manifold, port injectors, standalone controller for the fuel injectors. I think if they just integrated D4S into all of their FA series engines, they'd sell fantastically because people could actually make bigger power a lot easier on them instead of maxing out direct injectors, high pressure fuel pumps, and running into the same problems that they're going to run into on the FA20 that they did with the FA24 when they try to push past a certain horsepower interval. Just because at that point, when you start adding standalone fuel injection and adding port injection, it gets so much more expensive at that point. And then you're trying to find a specific tuner who knows how to tune this stuff.
Yeah, you're bringing in a big addition of complexity. But then the other thing too, that I'm really surprised that more manufacturers have not brought port injection back with the direct injection, because you balance those two systems and it really reduces any of the issues you have with carbon buildup, carbon in the intake. I mean, it should actually make the cars more reliable, have less issues. The cost of ownership should be less if you have those two fuel systems in place versus going all the way over to direct injection only.
Yeah, because then you don't have to deal with Walnut blasting the valves every 30,000 miles, or doing
Yep.
Subaru's induction service to clean the valves
Yep.
and everything like that. Just having both of them, it's the best of both worlds. I think that's why I like the BRZ FA20, FA24 a little bit more than the WRX, is just because it's already all built out in the ECU to be able to control all of that.
Yeah, you already have that just right there at your disposal versus having to add it.
Yeah,
Sure.
because I mean, even if you were to compare it over to a WRX, if the average WRX enthusiast and BRZ enthusiast wanted to go down the same route, they're both going to add all of these modifications, especially WRX owners doing turbocharge upgrades, exhaust manifolds, external wastegates, turbos, intakes, all that stuff. If you just do all that to a BRZ, you already got the fuel system to support it for the most part.
Yeah, way easier to use the stock ECU and tune for all of that versus having to like do a lot of add-ons to get that same functionality.
Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Well, as we're getting close to the end here, Scotty, any other thoughts or questions you wanted to throw out there?
No, man, just thank you for doing what you do.
Hey, anytime. I appreciate you guys for having me on here. And
that's a good videos.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, we'll have to at some point bring on again. I'm very curious, once you've got the 6-cylinder running and driving and you've had some time with it, I would love to get you back on to see what the experience is like, what it's like after you've lived with it for a month or two and played with it a bit.
As soon as that car is tuned, I'm going to be driving that thing every single day.
As you should. If you've had to wait to drive your STI for 2 years, yes, once it's running, you should drive it as much as you can.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely down for that. Also, just to throw this out there, I appreciate what you guys do and the parts that you guys sell, because a lot of the stuff that I try to find half the time, nobody ever has. So I appreciate the inventory and the stock that you guys keep.
Well, I appreciate that. We do our best. It's been challenging in the last year, to say the least, but I don't know. We always do our best. And so
thank you.
It's always been the weird stuff that I look for that you guys have, like the RCM stuff, Subaru bucket, like valve buckets, all this weird stuff that nobody ever stocks or nobody ever has on their website that you guys have. So I do appreciate that.
Well, yeah, what we've tried to do as much as possible, like with the buckets, for instance, like make it easy. It's like
the whole drop down menu that you guys have, way easier than trying to cross reference part numbers everywhere.
Yeah, that was we after having to look up buckets for a few customers way back when, realized like there has got to be a better way, and realized, well, wait, everybody that's rebuilding their engines, well, they've got to shim the buckets. They have to do this. And you look around and like, yeah, even getting in the catalog, what's funny is the order in the catalog is it's broken. So it's like you start here, you go to here, you get to the maximum size, then it starts over at the minimum size and goes up from there. But a lot of people at the parts counters, they don't know that. And so you need something on the small side. And like, it doesn't exist. This is the smallest size. Like, well, guys, if you go over here, it's there.
Go to the next page.
Yeah, I'm like, no, it doesn't. So yeah, we do what we can to make things easy for people, and I'm glad that it's helping.
Yeah, I do appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Well, Tanner, thanks again very much for taking the time and chatting with us. Really, really appreciate it. Everybody that's listening, if you're not already, check out his channel. Go watch the build of the 6-cylinder STI, the STI that Subaru wouldn't build. Check it out.
If they're new coming over and checking it out, hey, you guys missed all the lengthy stuff that took me forever to figure out.
Yeah, well, and you can go back.
So go back to watch the old ones.
Yeah, check it out. Just put it on a loop. Just get it going. Well, and Tanner, as we're wrapping up, anything else you want to plug or let people know about?
I mean, not for the most part. I mean, if anyone does want to go check out the EG33 STI, it's a wild car. There's only 3 other ones that I know of that have ever been built to this extent, which is Andy Forrest's Time Attack 1, ASF Machines, and then my buddy Kevin down in Australia. So I think it's just the 4 of us that are playing with these to this extent of power levels. So if you want to check it out, cool stuff.
Definitely. Very cool. Well, thanks very much, Tanner, for your time. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for your support as always. And until next time, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Once again, we'd like to let you know that your support is what makes this show possible. Be sure to check out our online store at flatirons.com for any of your aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts needs. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.